Hey, Maddie,
Hey, Jesse.
have you ever had a character die?
Yes.
What
Multiple.
happened?
Well, which time? On purpose deaths or TPKs or matter of circumstance?
I don't think I've ever been in a TPK as much as it's a thing people talk about in RPGs. I'm having a hard time remembering characters I've had that actually died. But yeah, so a character death. Have you had a character death where it was planned with the GM as part of a story arc?
Yep.
Have
It
you
was
had
your Dark Sun game.
Yes, that poor wizard. I remember him now because I killed him, beaten to death over gruel in the slave pits of Tyr. Okay. Have you ever had a surprise character death?
Like I wasn't expecting it and it just happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever had another player kill your player character? Yeah.
Because if they killed my player, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Wait a minute.
I realized
Am I a ghost?
Yes. The ghost of all the dinosaurs.
Yeah. Yes, I've had another player character kill my player character.
Jeez.
I've seen a lot of death, bro, in role-playing games.
Huh.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
I've been thinking about this recently. I'm wondering if killing player characters is even necessary.
Yeah, I think the character death I can recall is something that I still think is sort of unfair. Because it wasn't a result of my character's actions, and I felt like it was a poor interpretation of the rules.
Ooh. Anytime that's brought into question, your character should not die.
Yeah. So what happened is we're exploring this thing, and I'll admit my character was an asshole. This was on the more edgy side of when I was making characters, early 20s, I think. He was a bard, the first incarnation of Dashing Jack Daft, the bard I've played in various incarnations for years since then. And there was like an explosive runes trap or something that the big idiot barbarian like triggered when he kicked open a door like he always did. And he made his saving throw. So the GM ruled it passed to the next person who was standing 5 feet behind him, who made his saving throw. And then it passed to me, and I failed my saving throw and just died from damage right there.
What rules system is this?
3.0 D&D.
And do you think that is a moment where you can play your rules lawyer card and say, what spell or what effect is this? And does it specifically state in the effects in the book if this thing gets passed on, if multiple people save on it? Do you think that that's appropriate? Because I think that's one of the few and rare occasions where it is appropriate to rules lawyer the DM.
See, I think in that situation, you're maybe beyond a point where rules lawyering is going to make a difference.
That's
because that felt targeted.
So the GM put a hit out on you.
I felt like it. Yeah. There's not a lot you can do in the GM. And I will admit I had not necessarily understood what his campaign was about or what he was going for.
What was the issue?
I had never read Wheel of Time, and it was supposed to be a Wheel of Time game.
That's hilarious. I was just thinking about this today in the shower. Go ahead.
Yeah. I got the cleric killed in my first game session. There was a big tablet in these ruins that said, "This is a place of holiness. Do not raise your weapon in anger in this place, or the fire of the god shall descend upon you." And I was the only one that could read it because I had bardic lore or whatever it was called in 3.0. And my character's whole concept was that I was a neutral evil bard that just stirred shit up to have something to write a good song about. That's what I do when I play bards. I don't do the seductive sex addict bards. I'm just like, I'm going to make an interesting story, so it's true and I can sing about it. And so he said, "What does it say?" I said, "Oh, nothing. It's just a list of dwarven grudges." And then the Murdral, or whatever they are, the big faceless bads from Wheel of Time came in. Like it was a fight we weren't supposed to fight. We were supposed to let them strike first and be plunged. But I had told the battle cleric, it said, so he attacked and he was consumed by holy fire.
Oh.
Yeah.
And is there a value to character death now that you can cite for the podcast a time where you were unjustly killed?
Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit old school here and say that we've had this conversation before. One of the things that I really think is that if you are playing in a player skill game, because, there's character skill and there's player skill, and some of the older traditions where things are a little bit more lethal, there's an amount of player skill. And I personally, as long as everybody at the table knows that's what you're doing, I think that can be a fun way to play where there are real consequences. And I think it might be one of the ways to deal with murder hobos of like, there's a very real consequence to your action. You just got killed by the town card. Yeah, I mean, if you've got a game with combat, having death be on the table, I think is a thing that needs to happen. If you're doing just like straight story gaming, I don't know that it needs to. What about you?
What if death was on the table, but it wasn't permanent? Like, what if every character class had within it some sort of design as a part of its thematics that you died, there is a consequence of some kind, but you don't lose the character. Like, let's say you're a wizard, your specialty is necromancy, and there's like a feat-like benefit for your character that when you die, you rise from the grave 24 hours later.
Arise from your grave.
And you take some sort of penalty, or you're changed fundamentally, or, whatever. Like there's some sort of thematic element, and you can die any number of times. But you keep on taking that penalty or a series of penalties. So you essentially don't lose the character. Like we joked around in our introductory episode about what essentially a multi-dimensional adventurer whose character kit is to summon other versions of themselves. And who's to say if that character dies, like another character can't suddenly come through a portal and be like, oh crap, I didn't get here in time. Oh, well, what are we doing, guys? You know what I mean? Like you get to still play the character, and then there could be some in-game like twist to reflect a consequence, whatever that is, whether it's like dropping them a level or creating an XP deficit or, penalizing an ability or removing items from them or something, because it seems like the way 5e D&D is right now is that like the game is designed so that you don't get killed.
Yeah, I would agree.
And I'm wondering if look, again, I hate to be this guy. I'm not going to criticize the people who created D&D too much, right? Like I have to give it the respect it deserves. This is the most popular, most successful version of the game. And if they figured out that it's better if people's characters don't die and that sells more books, I can't fault that logic. But I work in character death on purpose. In that Dark Sun game, I rolled another character who I only wanted them to be in the game for a very short period of time. And when I had a moment for them to make an exit and sacrifice themselves for the party, they did. And that was that. And so it makes me wonder if we could if we had a game where character death was in the cards, where the player gets to choose it, right? So the GM will say, your character cannot truly be killed unless you decide it. Now, does that, like, what's the harm in that? I mean, I can think of some harm in that, but tell me, what's the harm in that?
I'd want it to be a halfway in between that.
Okay.
Why have a fight?
It's fun.
Is it fun if you know you can't really lose? I mean, I don't know. To me, death is the lose condition in the fight. And if you remove the lose condition, I feel, I don't know.
Is death the lose condition, or can we create a different lose condition? Like in American football, does one team get executed if they don't win the game?
I'd watch a lot more football if that were the stakes. I would say, so here's the thing that I like that Dread does.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You pull Dread, for those of you who don't know, is a horror RPG pretty much designed for one shots. There's maybe you can do campaign play. I don't know why you would. It's a death spiral game. Whenever you do a challenge mechanically, you have to pull a block from a Jenga tower. If it's really hard, you might have to pull 2 or 3 blocks. If you pull the block that causes the tower to collapse, the rules as written are when it is story relevant, your character is dead. Doesn't happen right that second.
Right.
But at the first time it's convenient to the story, you can write your own exit, but it happens. Like you are now on borrowed time.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's way more interesting than just like your character gets worse, but you can still play him. I don't mind it being an option, but I don't think I'd really enjoy it being like that's the way things are all the time.
Mm-hmm. I got you.
Unless you were going into a really creepy long-term horror game where the players eventually long for death because they're like, yeah.
Well, horror games have their own problems, right? Like horror games, like horror movies, should be short or shorter than your standard game or standard movie. You can only keep that feeling of suspense and dread going for so long. And I think in a horror game, that's when death really should be on the table. And you shouldn't be able to have like death saves, for instance. It reminds me of like those old school D&D adventures where, what was that one? The Tomb of Horrors, I think, where it was like, what was the one where it had like a bunch of rooms and like one would kill you if you stuck your head in a hole or something like that, and one room would like change your
the
gender.
Yawning black hole at like the front entrance, like the Tomb of Annihilation or something.
Oh, that's what it was. Not the Tomb of Horrors, the Tomb of Annihilation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you're playing that style of game, the death should be on the table. Of course, that's like the whole point. But I wonder, is death really on the table with 5e? How many people out there are losing their characters often enough in 5e?
Judging by what TikTok shows me, it's happening all the time. And I'm
really?
Like, how? How?
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
And I don't know if I'm missing the context of like these people are like, yeah, we decided it was time. Yeah, the death saves. I mean, you got to get past your defenses.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like right now, okay, so I play a fighter in our current 5e game, and I, for story reasons, have not been wearing my armor for multiple sessions. Yeah. I left it in a barrel of sand on the boat so it wouldn't get rusty, and didn't think we'd be fighting anything while we were in port, so I left it there. So I'm unarmored. I am a 4th level fighter. Would you say that our dungeon master has been pulling punches in the fights he throws at us?
No, I don't think
We're getting attacked by were-rats from darkness, like multiple enemies at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not pushovers. I haven't even come close. I haven't been down to a 3rd hit points, and I'm the guy in the front line with no armor. Like,
yeah, but that's also because my character has been spending every spell slot he has healing everybody in the party.
Well, I mean, good job, but
like, well, yeah, but if I had decided not to play the healer character, maybe you would have died. I don't know. Or maybe we would have retreated back into the whorehouse and rested. I'm sorry, the brothel.
Yes.
Because sex work is work. No disrespect.
So, yeah, I don't know. What does a death save do?
I don't know. I don't even know why they're in the game. Like if you look up Grimdark rules for 5e, death saves are the first thing they pull. And every time. It's like it's the low-hanging fruit of making your 5e game more gritty or hardcore or lethal.
Your character drops. there's a 1 in 20 chance you're dead. Oh no, because a 1 is 2 failed saves.
Mm-hmm.
And a 20 is an automatic stabilized. I don't even think that's actually that. It doesn't add any mechanical tension. I feel like that's probably the design decision behind it, but it's not really tense.
The death save, in my opinion, is just player busy work. It's like your character gets down. You now have nothing to do in the game.
You still get to roll a dice on your turn. Isn't that fun? Here's your shiny dice.
Yeah, that's what it's for.
It's a great name for a t-shirt company.
So
send us merch, Joe. Send us merch.
I don't like death saves at all. I think they're pointless. I think if you get dropped past 0 hit points, you should just be dead. And that's that.
Oh, then why did we just have this entire conversation before about a way where people don't die? They just come back twisted.
Because the question isn't like what mechanic should dictate whether you die. The question is like, is it absolutely necessary to have death in a role-playing game?
Yeah. Is it necessary? Okay. No. Yeah. Would I want to play a fantasy game without it? Probably not so much.
Okay. What if you played a modern day game where you're a sexy female lawyer trying to work her way up the corporate ladder at a prestigious law firm in New York?
Yeah, only if it narratively made sense and was worked out with the person running the game.
Well, do you see my point though? Like
but I'm guessing that game doesn't have a combat as like a core component of its, well, the way RPG books are written, maybe it does, but
Right. I mean, are there some games that you played where death isn't an option? What about like, I've never played it, but what about Monster Hearts? Is there death in that?
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's all kinds of Faustian deals you can make to get out of it. Like,
have you ever
the whole premise is you give teenagers with their incredible amounts of empathy, supernatural powers, and the anger of teenagers. Yeah, no one's ever going to get, killed. In the last game of that I was playing, I was working up towards killing somebody. It was an NPC, but
Is there a role-playing game where death is not? Like, do you play with your kids, right? You play a modified version of some sort of fantasy role-playing game for your kids? Is death an option for them?
Based on old school essentials from Necrotic Gnome, published by Exalted Funeral.
Is death an option?
Yeah, they can die. They don't know it yet, but it hasn't come up, as it were. But there may be, it'll probably be Alaska the Witch who gets it. Vanyar the Warrior is a shrewd and cunning foe. So Alaska the Witch is my 7-year-old and Vanyar is my 5-year-old. So
for sure. I don't know. I mean, I would be interested in playing in a game that doesn't have death, but then has consequences associated with it, just to see if that actually matters or not.
There's that. I'm trying to remember the name, Passions de la Passions. It's like based on like telenovelas, using like
keep going.
Yeah, death might not be. That might be one where death is not a big deal. I think it uses, I want to say it's a Powered by the Apocalypse game. I think in the current age we're in, where a lot of RPGs beyond the mainstream fantasy ones are genre emulators, there are genres where you don't need a combat system and death doesn't need to be a part of it. Like, so when I did that thing based on Honey Heist, where I made a hack about bridge kids, which was very specific to where I grew up, about being teenagers, boards, wannabe counterculture teenagers hanging out in the city in the artsy district of town and going off and running pranks and stuff. There's no death rules in that because that's not the point of that game, to die.
Right.
But I don't expect anyone to actually ever play that game. So, yeah.
Well, you had me watch a short first episode about Stormcast for the Age of Sigmar
Oh, you watched it?
setting. Yeah, I watched it today while I was trying not to violently throw up because I had horrible hiccups.
That's the gift of Nurgle.
Yes. And when a Stormcast dies, they are reforged in lightning and remade, and it's Sigmar's will. And then there's pieces of their personality and memory that go missing. And that's an aspect of running that kind of character. And you're running an Age of Sigmar game. Do I have carte blanche with my current Stormcast character to just run him into everything, expecting that you're going to bring him back for me so I can play him in the next game so I don't have to sit out next session?
Yeah.
Okay. And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Because I trust you to play.
Okay. What if I was just a neutral player? Just you don't know anything about me. Is that on the table?
I would see how you took it, how you took dying, and then be like, it's going to take the reforging is an instant, like the reforging happens at a narrative moment that I deem worthwhile. And are you sent back down to the soulbound, or are you tasked to something else? Like, does your character continue to be relevant in the story? It can, it cannot.
Yeah, but wouldn't you rather have my character be relevant in the story? We're playing a role-playing game.
Yeah, but what if you wanted to make a new character?
Let's assume I don't want to make a new character.
Yeah. Yeah, you keep coming back.
Okay. And is that break whatever rule we're kind of discussing about consequence? Like, I essentially have no consequences then.
Well, the consequence would be like, what is the thing that you feel is missing inside you the most this time?
But that's
I would
story.
Yeah, because it would be in service of the story.
Right. Which that's catnip for somebody like me.
Mm-hmm.
But just generically speaking, I would assume, and maybe I shouldn't, that the Age of Sigmar role-playing game is not being played every time by a group of story gamers.
I wish them the best of luck if they're not, because
they're all playing Stormcast Eternals and none of them can properly be killed. They just keep coming back next session. There are rules for some hardcore 5e or grimdark or whatever setting where the instructions basically, like Dark Sun did this from back in the day, the second edition D&D version of Dark Sun was like, hey, you're going to make 3 characters. 3 to 5
character
characters.
Tree.
Yes. When one of them dies, the other one is coming in immediately. And we don't need a story, for it. They're just going to run right in. That's the way I ran Dark Sun, is you had 3 characters. When one of them died, the other one just came running right in. Then if I could make it happen in the next round, I would. Because it's like, why am I wasting time in the game trying to like work a story reason for your character, for your next character to come into the game? Like that's pointless. Who gives a shit?
Well, I think second edition Dark Sun is a very different game from the way I got a tiny amount of Dark Sun games played in 2E, like one shots mostly. And that's a topic I want to bring up, but I won't get into it now because otherwise our banter episode will go crazy long. Yeah, I think that is a game where it would be wasting time. But I don't know that all of them are. I mean, like, to me, there's a ratcheting up of tension. One of your characters, one of the players' character dies in combat. You now have less resources to finish this fight, which poses some new interesting challenges and ratchets up the tension.
Okay. Well, do we have anything else to say on the matter of should player characters be killed?
I don't think you should ever go for a TPK, but I think you should try and make your players feel like a TPK is on the table at all times.
I think everybody should be TPK'd at least once in their gaming career, just so you know what it feels like.
I thought I was going to get it in the Lizard Man game. And then
That's a good point. the Lizard Man game that I ran used those hardcore gritty rules for 5e. And we started with a character funnel, which is something I learned from Dungeon Crawl Classics, I believe.
Yes. If you're unfamiliar with this, the concept is you have a 0 level character who basically has like a profession, like a loaf of bread if they're a baker, and maybe like a knife for cutting bread. And you make like 4 of them. And then you run them through the first adventure, and whoever survives becomes your first level character who proceeds on the adventure.
Mm-hmm. And the way I did it was the party was playing a tribe of lizard men, and they were enacting a celebration that involves, the tribe running through this dangerous gauntlet that's simulating an important moment in their shared history together, and it's lethal.
Oh my God.
Everybody makes
so lethal.
4 lizard man characters, and you could get killed by falling into a hole because there's spikes in it. Like, that's how weak the characters were.
One of my characters died from falling in a hole with spikes in it. Another one fell in a hole, survived, but then a flaming shard of metal fell out of the sky into the hole.
That's right. So the way we did it is, if your character survived, if one of your lizard men survived, that was your character. And the base characters have been rolled randomly for their profession in the way Jesse described it just now. But if you had multiple characters survive, then you got to choose, and then your other character became your backup character, who would level at a rate of 1 level behind you. So if you start at first level, both your main character and your backup character are first level. And then when your main character levels up to level 2, the backup character stays at level 1 until the main character gets to level 3, and then they go up to level 2. So then the storyline is that throughout the game, there was an Ewok adventure style caravan with the lizard men, and they were all traveling in a group, so that if one of your lizard men died, the other one was like, well, I'm right here. I'll, just jump right in. So
we didn't really lose any characters after that funnel, though.
I know, right?
It made us cautious.
That's an interesting thing, is I tried to run a hardcore game with an elevated level of danger. It was a 5e game where you had less hit points. The rules for healing were significantly altered. Everything was more deadly, and yet nobody lost a character after the funnel. And I felt like such a fucking failure.
I've had the same experience running Morkborg as a one-shot. Like,
how does anybody survive that?
I don't know. They all did. My brother-in-law sacrificed his monkeys that he had rolled one at a time to distract this giant worm with 50 hit points. They somehow managed to slay. And I was like, well, fair enough. I think that's the reason. It's things like that happening that is why I like the old school idea, where death is on the table. It's a consequence, but ruling not rules. That death pressure for your player character makes you do more creative things. I feel like
I agree.
Makes you be more creative than just I swing and I hit.
I once ran this is some of the most fun I've ever had in a one shot. I ran a one shot where everybody played. This was 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons. Everybody played basically a naked human who had been captured and forced to fight in a gladiatorial combat in an arena for whatever reason. And they fight for their freedom. They gain their freedom. They escape the tournament. And then they're out in the wilderness and they have nothing. And part of their escape process involved them having to really think about how they were going to do it, because I think only one of them actually had a weapon that they had managed to like keep and like hide on themselves as they were being pulled out of, the pits, the gladiatorial pits. And it was some of the most fun, spontaneous gameplay I've ever seen in a one shot. Like, they were trying to get past a guard on a ledge, and they rolled to sneak up on him. And then and the idea was to push him over the ledge, but failure of the roll, they made sound. He turned around and they decided to bum rush him all as one instead of the one person running at them. And it almost resulted in all of them going over the edge. And they made it through the fight, and they were all like high-fiving each other afterwards. I've never seen, such excitement for, people playing 4 naked gladiators who just bum rushed a sleeping guard off of a railing. You know what I mean? Like they didn't kill a dragon and take the treasure. They lived, damn you. So
I know that's okay. I'm going to mention this idea just for our notes for a future episode, because we should kind of bring this one up to its natural death, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
There's campaign assumptions with what we've talked about, the fun with death and one shots and ramping the stakes up. I heard this on another podcast I was listening to today. It's called the Glitter Boys podcast, BOIS. It's a Palladium fan podcast. They just talk about riffs, Palladium fantasy, Robotech, like all that stuff. But they were talking about the assumption of a long campaign and how back in the day, maybe when we started, that was the assumption. Death in a long-running campaign, I feel like, is a thing that handles differently than death in a one-shot.